golf can get intense. From the beginning of the sport, rivalries have been born. Rivalries that have helped sculpt this great sport that we love so much. And there are few that can match the intensity and excitement more than Tiger versus Phil. Born in 1975, Tiger Woods burst onto the golf scene at a very young age. A prodigy, a phenom. These were just some of the words used to describe the young golf star. During his come-up, there was already another golfer who was establishing himself, Phil Mickelson. Being born in 1970, Phil was a few years older than Tiger. After playing golf in college, he quickly turned pro and began his legendary career. And it didn't take long for the two to meet, and when they did, it was must-see TV. Over the early portion of their careers, it was Tiger that was in the spotlight, holding a total of 15 major championships and winning seemingly every major in the late 90s. Tiger has been largely considered the GOAT, but everywhere he looked, Mickelson was there. In 2000, Phil ended Tiger's streak of 6 straight PGA wins. Throughout the 2000s, the two paired off in battles on countless occasions. More often than not, Tiger came out on top. As the years kept moving, Tiger fell out of the spotlight due to personal issues. While Phil continued to thrive, the debate was on a hot topic. Who's better, Tiger or Phil? Then in 2018, it happened. An ultimate showdown in what is referred to in one simple term, the match. This was match play between Wood and Mickelson, with the winner receiving the full purse of $9 million. And of course, they were tied after 18 holes. After 22 long holes, Mickelson came out on top. You might think this puts Mickelson at the forefront of this intense rivalry. The answer to that is a little more difficult. Mickelson did get his fair share of victories facing Woods, but Tiger is largely considered one of the greatest and game-changing athletes of all time. So, who was better? That's for you to decide. Next up, we have a rivalry with a bit more hatred. Bryson DeChambeau and Brooks Koepka. In 2019, Koepka made some simple comments about DeChambeau's play style, making fun of how long he took between shots. Bryson didn't take this well, and the biggest feud in golf began. This rivalry was much different than others throughout golf history, and it's for one simple reason: social media. Rather than everything happening on the course, this rivalry has been bred through petty comments. The two indirectly took jabs at one another in interviews, went at each other on social media, and proved time and time again they simply don't like each other. Over the years, their fans have taken even bolder stances, and it's become an all-out war on the internet. All this led to another major stamp in golf's vast history: the match. Sound familiar? After Tiger vs. Phil, PGA decided to make the match an annual event. This meeting on the course just happened to be the first one-on-one since Tiger and Phil, because it was the first rivalry that was worth it. After a close round of 18 holes, Koepka pulled out the victory. Only one question remains in this intense rivalry: what will happen next? Okay, let's go over a rivalry that stays within the boundaries of being a gentleman's game. After all, not every rivalry has to be intense outside of the golf course. In the late 80s, the rivalry of Paul Azinger vs. Seve Ballesteros began to heat up. The Ryder Cup legends first crossed paths in 1989, and the matchup was brutal. They went at each other, talking trash and competing in a fierce battle. Azinger came into the matchup far less accomplished than Ballesteros, but came out with his first major victory. After the ceremonies, the two buried the hatchet and apologized for how the match had gone down. Just 2 years later, the two were set to face off again. Ballesteros famously referred to the American golf team as 11 nice guys and Paul Azinger. Azinger clapped back, calling Ballesteros the king of gamesmanship. Over the years, the two brought some of the most controversial moments in Ryder Cup history, and somehow, through it all, they remained friends. Despite it all, I just couldn't help loving the guy, except for 1 week every other year. Not only will their matches forever be etched in golf lore, but the sportsmanship between Paul Azinger and Seve Ballesteros will never be forgotten. Next up, let's go back a few generations. In the 1960s, the greatest rivalry in golf was a tale of two legends, Arnold Palmer versus Jack Nicklaus. In 1960, Palmer had already established himself by winning multiple majors. In the US Open that year, Palmer would dominate the field with yet another win. The strange part was the runner-up, a 20-year-old amateur by the name of Jack Nicklaus. Everyone in the golf world was intimidated by the mighty Arnold Palmer. Everyone but Nicklaus. Just 2 years later, they would face off yet again at the US Open. This time, Nicklaus was at a major disadvantage. Not only was he a rookie 22-year-old, but the crowd was strongly for Palmer, yelling at him, trying to get in his head. Nicklaus had to zone them out and focus on the task at hand, and he did just that. Coming down to an 18-hole playoff, Nicklaus would take down the mighty Palmer in front of the entire country. And this was just the beginning. Over the next decade, the two battled it out on the course. When it was all said and done, Nicklaus held a slim 30-29 lead in head-to-head matchups. But it was their legacies that were affected the most. The reason this rivalry was so big in the eyes of golf fans had nothing to do with any type of feud. In fact, the two were known as friends even after their careers were long over. This was a rivalry for one simple reason: they were the best in the world. Without Nicklaus, Palmer might have gone down as the most decorated golfer of all time. Without Palmer, Nicklaus might have doubled his already staggering career numbers. They needed each other. Golf needed them. And because of their fierce rivalry, the sport will never be the same. As Jack got older in his career, he would face a similar situation as he did with Palmer. Only this time, the spots were flipped. When Tom Watson made his way onto the scene, Nicklaus had already certified himself as the best in the game. Yet the two would form a legendary matchup that has stood the test of time. This rivalry is a bit different from what you're probably used to. Typically, these matchups can get bitter. With Nicklaus and Watson, though, that couldn't be further from the truth. In reality, the two were close friends, which is odd considering Tom Watson completely altered the end of Nicklaus's storied career. Being 10 years younger, Tom didn't burst onto the scene until late in Jack's career. When he did, he was a complete thorn in Nicklaus's side. And in 1977, we get the greatest moment to come from this rivalry. Perhaps the greatest golf match in history, the duel in the sun. Picture this: a lanky 27-year-old shows up to a prestigious tournament and goes toe-to-toe with the greatest golfer of all time. Then, in the final round, on the final hole, he sinks a shot to win the whole thing. That's exactly what Watson did at the 1977 British Open. Then, as the two strolled off the golf course, they did so side by side, as friends. Over the next decade, Watson and Nicklaus dazzled the nation with their epic performances. And much like Nicklaus did to Palmer, Watson took his fair share of majors away from Jack. Ultimately, that's where this rivalry makes its biggest impact. Imagine a world where Jack Nicklaus was unimpeded on the back half of his career, or where Tom Watson didn't have to face Nicklaus. I guess those are questions we'll never get answered.